Hello, I am Enrique Quesada, and this is the Judy Lay Allen Mexico Center podcast from the Center for the United States and Mexico at Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy. On June 5th, Mexican voters in 6 states went out to the polls to elect new governors as well as other local elected officials. 4 of the governorships were won by Morena and its allies. Do these results point to the president's party consolidating their status as the dominant party? What do they tell us about the 2024 elections? To answer these and other questions, I sat down with Alejandro Cruz in my recent visit to Mexico City. Alejandro Cruz is the Director for Special Studies at BGC Ulises Beltrán y Asociados and an expert in local elections in Mexico. Before playing this conversation for you, I want to thank Haynes & Boone for providing us the space to record this interview in their offices in Mexico City. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Alejandro Cruz. Alejandro Cruz, Director for Special Studies at BGC Ulises Beltrán y Asociados, an expert in electoral politics in Mexico, especially in local elections. Thank you so much for accepting the invitation to be on the podcast.
Thank you for your invitation.
And this is the second time we recorded this because I forgot to press play the first time. So thank you for allowing us to restart. We are talking today about the June 5 elections, the results and what they mean for democracy really in Mexico. We are a couple of weeks removed from the elections themselves, and so I'm wondering what we know now that the dust has settled. But first, can you walk us through the results more generally? There were 6 governorships at play. Who had them? Who won them? What does this mean?
Yes. Well, as you said, we had elections in 6 states. In most of the cases were for governorships, and 1 case for local deputies also, and in another state, Durango, for mayors as well. The results. Well, first, we have to say the state, no? These 6 states were Durango, Aguascalientes, Tamaulipas, Hidalgo, Quintana Roo, and Oaxaca. In all the cases, the main challenger was Morena, no? Which is the main party at the national level, but not at the state. This party, at least in this occasion, weren't governing in any case. No? The outcome of the elections, well, Morena won 4 elections, in Oaxaca, Quintana Roo, Hidalgo, and Tamaulipas. In almost all the cases, with a big lead, no? In comparison with votation obtained by the alliance of the PRI, PAN, and PRD. No? In 2 states, Durango and Aguascalientes, this alliance, the PRI, PAN, PRD, won the election. They defeated Morena. Which is the relevance of this election? Well, if we consider this in terms of the demographic or political or economical terms, well, this as a whole, these states are not really important, no? Because, for example, in terms of population, they make up around 13% of the total inhabitants of the country, and economically, these states don't weigh much either. So, which is the importance? Well, first is the confirmation of the trends, electoral trends we have seen since the victory of López Obrador. No? From the start of his term, we have seen that Morena has passed from having no governorship to having now, with its allies, 21 or 22 if we included San Luis Potosí. Wow. No? It's a fast change.
Right,
no?
Yeah.
And now this party has been consolidating as the main party in Mexico. We can say that now this is the only party with a significant presence in almost or practically all the states in Mexico. No? On the contrary, the PRI has changed, has lost its power, electoral power, and now it's becoming only a regional force, no, like the PAN. No? Yeah. Perhaps this is the first thing we have to say in terms of the relevance of this election. No? So that now Morena will be governing around 60% of the population of the country, and almost the same proportion in terms of the economic weight of the state it will govern.
So, in terms of these particular elections, these states, in terms of governance, they're not as important perhaps as other states, but they just confirm the power that Morena has and the momentum that they've been building. What does it mean in terms of governance for the López Obrador presidency? Does this help him in any way, as he's finishing this term?
I can give you an example. In the first years of the López Obrador administration, you can find an alliance of opposition governors, no? Very vocal, no? Criticizing what López Obrador were proposing, no? But after losing many of these opposition governors, after losing their parties, the following state elections, now you see new governors, but from Morena. Yeah. So now you don't see anymore this alliance of governors. Right. So it's more in that sense for López Obrador. It's a better scenario. Now he's now facing against the opposition.
So what does this mean for 2024?
If we can predict the result from what happened. No. Well, of course, these results and the results from the elections last year, the intermediate election, when there was also a change in more than 10 governorships, these results give, of course, an excellent electoral base platform to start the process to the race, for the presidential race. Huh? But we had experiences in the past that similar, and you see that in the presidential election, the results were quite different. No? For example, in 2004 and 2005, the PRI had an outstanding performance in local election. So you could expect very good performance in the presidential election. The pre-presidential candidate ended up in third place.
You're right.
And López Obrador, running by as candidate of the PRD, and Calderón of the PAN, were concentrating the attention of the electorate. So it's a broad electoral base before the start of the electoral process for the presidential contest is necessary, but not necessarily enough. No? The presidential election has a distinctive personal touch or character. No, the people watch. No, who are the candidates. No, this is a very important factor for that election. A lackluster candidate or discredited candidate, like at that time, for example, was Roberto Madrazo, complicate things for the parties postulating this kind of person.
Yeah. So moving then to when we'll talk a little bit about the opposition, because that will also matter as to like what happens in 2024. But in terms of thinking about this elections and what we're seeing from Morena and really from the party in power. Was this what we would call in Spanish an elección de Estado? Was this like a state election, meaning that the party was using state resources to help kind of with an electoral victory.
Yeah, perhaps this is the main concern now, looking at the way Morena is doing things, to win elections. There are now brigades of government personnel known as the servants of the nation, who are in charge of informing and contacting people in order to be beneficiaries of the social programs, the national, the federal social programs. And what we have seen in many local elections is that these servants of the nation serve with a double function, as promoters of the social programs and as promoters of the vote for Morena. In these elections in June, we could see cases, there are videos and testimonies about it. I can, for example.
And I want to say these are allegations and things that the PRI or PRI was famous for doing,
yes.
and that López Obrador himself accused the PRI of doing before.
Yes, it's the same, but now we're a different party,
right.
And still in many of the states, still controlled by the PAN or by the PRI, you can find also this kind of practices. For example, in Tamaulipas, it's said that the Tamaulipas government, the PAN government, were doing exactly the same, with the state or with the local social programs. At the end, what we see, there are complaints, of course, in this election, especially in states where Morena was weakened. For example, Durango and Aguascalientes, you see videos of civil servants from the Ministry of Welfare coordinating operative with the servants of the nation in order to induce beneficiaries to vote for Morena. In two senses, especially. One is linking the delivery, the handout of the benefits with the image of the President López Obrador. He's sending.
Yeah. So you know who's giving it to you.
Yes, exactly. And the other way, perhaps the most important, is that they were telling the beneficiaries that if they vote, or if an opposition party or the rival won the election, they could lose the social program, the benefit. So this is the problem that we are seeing now, and even these practices are sometimes done in a very shameless way. You can see it, and nothing happens, even if some opposition parties are complaining with the electoral bodies.
Yeah. So, and these are practices that are not necessarily new, but we see new actors doing them now that they have the resources to do them. Another way in which this may be, and I'm wondering about the role of this part about being an elección de Estado, is the way that Morena has been accused of using the government tools to go against opposition candidates or politicians from the opposition. One example may be that they said that they were using the financial unit, Unidad Financiera, with those kind of political purposes.
Yes, this is a notorious feature of the way the government has been proceeding, during this López Obrador administration. For example, you see that the pre-leaders is now being investigated, for cases of corruption, especially after the party voted against the electric reform. But also, if they see that in some states they have the Morena has the chance to compete, but it's not. Perhaps these states are not the best for them in terms of competitiveness. They try to also investigate candidates of the rivals. No? What if you see the elections in these months, you don't see problems in terms of the candidates of the PAN or PRI or the PRD. I think this persecution has been focused on the leaderships of the parties.
Another important topic here is that we have seen organized criminal organizations coming into the elections wanting to have some role. So there seems to be an evolving role of how they might do it. Did they stay out? Are they trying to play a role? What have we seen in these elections?
Well, no, perhaps in this election it wasn't an important feature, something that was really relevant, no? In comparison with what we saw last year. For example, in the intermediate elections and state elections in 2021, in a state like Sinaloa or Michoacán, definitely there were interventions of the crime, of the organized crime. No? I can say some example. No? In the day of the election in Sinaloa, the PRIO representative or operators were abducted or were threatened not to be present at the polling places as representative. You don't know any case of this kind of threats in these elections. Of course, there were cross accusations of both PAN and Morena against the rivals, no? In terms of saying that the governor candidates, the candidate of Morena, Américo Villarreal, or the candidate of the PAN, César Verástegui, saying that they were linked to any of the cartels operating in the state. But there are no real proofs about it, no? Although in Tamaulipas you never know, no? Because now we have 2 former governors in jail, exactly for these reasons. No? And in Durango there was a fear of that the cartel of Sinaloa could operate during the election. No? But at the end, well, and in favor of Morena, because it said that this cartel is supporting this party. As you know, probably know, Durango is bordering with Sinaloa and Chihuahua in the northwest, no? In an area so-called the Golden Triangle of the drug, no? The main area of operation of the cartel of Sinaloa. And perhaps by coincidence, all municipalities were won by Morena. But there are no serious complaints about the intervention of this cartel in the nomination of candidates or for example, trying to deter people from other candidates to be to run for position. That was this fact was something that you could see last year or in other local elections. We can say that there was a shadow of perhaps there was the organized crime present in some of these elections, but they weren't determinant in the decisive in the final result. It's more difficult for this criminal organization to try to influence, for example, the nomination of candidates in the case of what we see in this June. Is election of governors. This is a very high level, no? They try to influence, especially when there are elections for mayors. No? They try to designate the candidate, or they try to make arrangement with the candidates in order to have the possibility to designate the officer for public works or for license in the municipal government.
What is Morena's strategy in terms of, are they running on the record of like, this is what we've done, or a little bit of like, we are the party in power, like, we are the state party. Like, this is something that I think the PRI used to do a lot of, like, a lot of people have the image of like, well, they know how to govern because they've done it.
I think they do both. Well, Morena does both things. No? Well, if you see the political advertising, Morena, you see they are trying to say to the people that they are keeping their promises. No? And see, well, we have done this, we have delivered this, and this is a way that we can say they are trying to run on the record. No? But also, as we have commented before, they are practicing patronage. No? They are linking the social programs of the government with the for electoral purposes. No? This is something that is evident. No? The extent is different. No? For example, even in the case of Aguascalientes and Durango, it was very visible in popular neighborhoods, no? Working class neighborhoods, but not to the extent to define the electoral results. No? This kind of practices is also depend. For example, mobilize these brigades of servants of the nation costs money, no? And the authority of this government also reached to these kind of activities. No?
Morena, though, has lost some electoral support. Are people disenchanted with Morena? This may not be perhaps the party that they thought it was going to be when they voted for it in 2018, but don't really see an alternative, because we also have an opposition that, the PRI is losing more and more and more support. PAN seems to be the strongest of that opposition coalition. How do we see this result kind of overall of...
disenchantment with Morena? I don't think so.
No?
If you see, no. If you see the results, Morena has been advancing. For example, in this state, this party advanced in percentage of votes, no? In 4 states. So disenchantment you don't see. Disenchantment with the PRI and the PAN. Morena has a very good image at national level. No, if you see it in the surveys. So, very disenchantment. I don't think so. No, disenchantment with the PAN and the PRI, especially with the PRI. The PRI had a very bad image, and the PAN not necessarily in all places. For example, where in states where they are traditionally governing, for example, Aguascalientes or Guanajuato, the PAN had a reasonable good image. But in other places, many states, the PAN is facing also a problem of image. No? Especially if Morena and the president are linking the PAN, the image of the PAN with the image of the PRI, the PRIAN. No?
Right.
No?
Yeah.
So.
I'm wondering where to go with this last question, because thinking about this low rates of participation, what does this mean for the future of elections in Mexico, for the future of democracy? Are people not interested in participating, or is it simply that perhaps there doesn't seem to be competitive alternatives that actually result in competitive elections that make people turn out to vote? So where do you think, lies the problem?
These elections were notorious because of the low turnout.
Right.
In the best of the cases, the participation rate was around 50%. and in Quintana Roo was below 40%. This is notorious. Which are the reasons of this? Well, perhaps there are several reasons. No. One of them is that in some of these states there were no sense of close competition. For example, in states like Hidalgo, the candidate of Morena doubled the votes of the candidates of the alliance, the PRI-PAN-PRD. So many persons, especially those who are not really very interested in these kind of processes, could say, well, why are you going to bother to go if we know that Morena will win? A second factor is that these elections were for governors. This position is important for people, but not necessarily at the same level of elections of municipal governments, elections for mayors. No, mayors are an authority closer to the needs and demands of the citizens. Another factor, perhaps, we have to really evaluate is that there have been a lot of elections, no? And one election a year before, right. No? The intermediate elections. Then we have a people's it was a very low participation,
like a referendum.
Referendum.
Yeah.
But not the mandate recall.
That's true, yeah.
Yes, there was another consultation last year to see if the former president had to be prosecuted. No? Right. But the turnout was extremely low, so perhaps this is not important for this. But the mandate recall had also a low turnout, but it was more important, and especially in terms of mobilization of Morena followers. So, and now, that was last April, and now we have another election. For a Morena follower, there have been a lot of elections, 4 elections in 1 year to go to the polling places. So there is an electoral fatigue. About the future, Mexico is still a young democracy, no? With lights and shadows. No, you don't find these kind of claims of widespread electoral fraud that you could find in 20 years ago. Or 30 years ago, especially at the local level, or in 2006, López Obrador saying that the presidency was stolen by Calderón. But now you don't, I think increasingly you see that the people and parties are believing that the votes are now counted in a clean manner, no?
Right.
Probably. And also that we have a reliable voters registry, for example. But we have this other kind of weaknesses we have been talking in this interview, no? Especially the clientelistic practices that we see. No? Yeah. And there is also the fear of the federal government, the López Obrador government, tried to exert more control over the electoral bodies because they say these electoral bodies are biased in favor of the opposition parties and against Morena. And now there is a fear of democratic regression, right. No? Because they want, for example, he wants to change the way the electoral councilors in the federal and in the federal body, the National Electoral Institute, are appointed. No? So they want them to be elected by popular vote, knowing that Morena is the main party. So,
right. Yeah.
So you see, the new councilor will be biased, but now in favor of the government.
Right.
There is something perhaps that we haven't said, is what happened with the alliance are worth it? No? I think what we see in this election is that this alliance are worth it, partly, but if you have a lackluster or discredited candidates, these alliances are not useful, no? Or if there is no sense of close competition, a real competition, it doesn't matter if you form an alliance of 3, 4, or 5 parties. No, if you are the opposition, you will lose. You will lose the election. Now, Morena has advantage, but has an advantage in terms of what we have seen, electoral base through these elections that have been won during these years. But as you see, the poll, the surveys for this week, there have been published some polls, the results of some polls. You see that Morena is not so ahead in comparison with the preferences of the alliance of the pre-PAN PRD. So be careful, no? Be careful. It seems that because of the results of this year and the results last year, that Morena is going with no problems for the presidential election, but that is not necessarily true. If you see the global results and last year in the intermediate election, even if Morena and its allies won more votes than the other alliance, the difference wasn't so broad. So you don't know.
Well, I think that's a great place to end with that look at what we might expect in 2024, given what we just saw in this past month. So Alejandro Cruz, Director for Special Studies at BGC, Ulises, Beltrán y Asociados, thank you so much for answering these questions and for this conversation.
No, thank you for your invitation.
That was Alejandro Cruz. That is it for this episode. Thank you for listening to the Judy Lay Allen Mexico Center podcast. Thanks to Lisa Huacata, our program manager, and to Tony Payan, the director of the Center for the United States and Mexico at Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy. Special thanks to Judy Lay Allen, as well as Haynes and Boone for the generous support of the work we do at the Center. You can visit our website at bakerinstitute.org/Mexico, where you can find our latest publications. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the guests and the host and do not necessarily reflect those of the Center. If you have any comments or suggestions, you can email us at usmexicocenter@rice.edu. We would love to hear from you. Mexico Centered is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Radio Public, and Spotify. You can subscribe through your favorite podcast app to receive all of our new episodes directly on your phone. I am Enrique Quesada, and I will see you next time.